Chandram yajatam vishwadhayasam Damunasam grihapatim varenyam Tvamagni atithim purvyam vishaha Suchishkesham grihapatim nishedire Vrihatketum pururupam dhanaspritam Susharmanam swavasam jaradvisham Tvamagne manushirate Vishohotravidam Vivitimiratnadhatamam Guhasantam subhagavishwadarshatam Tuishwanasam sujayam kritashriyam.
Mantras of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, be sure that I am always present among you to guide you and help you in all your works and your sadhana. With my love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo from the collective works of our Lord Sri Aurobindo book Lights on Yoga, page 20. Continuation of Planes of the Being. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, what is meant by Prakriti or nature is the outer or executive side of the Shakti or conscious force which forms and moves the worlds. This outside appears to be mechanical, a play of forces, gunas. Behind it is the living consciousness, force of the divine Shakti. The Prakriti itself is divided into the lower and higher. The lower is the Prakriti of ignorance, the Prakriti of mind, life and matter, separated in consciousness from the divine. The higher is the divine Prakriti of Sachchidananda, with its manifesting power of Supermind, always aware of the divine and free from ignorance and its consequences. Man, so long as he is in ignorance, is subject to the lower Prakriti, but by spiritual evolution he becomes aware of the higher nature and seeks to come into contact with it. He can ascend into it and it can descend into him. Such an ascent and descent can transform the lower nature of mind, life and matter. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the overmind has to be reached and brought down from the supermind descent. Is at all possible? For the mind, the overmind, is the passage through which one passes from mind to supermind. It is from the overmind that all these different arrangements of creative truths of things originate. Out of the overmind they come down to the intuition and are transformed from it to the illumined mind and the higher mind to be arranged there for our intelligence. But they lose more and more of their power and certitude in the transmission as they come down to the lower levels. What energy of directly perceived truth they have is lost in the human mind. For to the human intellect they present themselves as speculative ideas, not as realized truth, not as direct sight, a dynamic vision coupled with a concrete, undeniable experience. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, Supermind is between the Sachchidananda and the lower creation. It alone contains the self-determining truth of the divine consciousness and is necessary for a truth creation. One can of course realize Sachchidananda in relation to the mind, life and body also, but then it is something stable, supporting by its presence of the lower Prakriti, but not transforming it. The supermind alone can transform the lower nature. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says Sachchidananda is the one with the triple aspect. In the Supreme, the three are not three but one. Existence is consciousness, consciousness is bliss, and they are thus inseparable. Not only inseparable, but so much so each other that they are not distinct at all. In the superior planes of manifestation, they become triune. Although inseparable, one can be made more prominent and base or lead the others. In the lower planes below, they become separable in appearance, though not in their secret reality. And one can exist phenomenally without the others, so that we become aware of what seems to us as inconscient or a painful existence, or a consciousness without ananda. Indeed, without this separation of them in experience, pain and ignorance, and falsehood and death, and what we call inconscience, could not have manifested themselves. There could not have been this evolution of a limited and suffering consciousness out of the universal nescience of matter.
La plus rigide, la plus étroite, la plus suffocante, j'ai touché un ressort tout-puissant qui m'a projeté d'un seul coup dans une immensité sans forme et sans limite, où vibre l'essence d'un monde nouveau. At the very bottom of the unconscious, most hard and rigid and narrow and stifling, I struck upon an almighty spring that cast me up forthwith into a formless, limitless, vast, vibrating with the seeds of a new world.
Next topic, surrender and opening. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo continues to say, the whole principle of this integral yoga is to give oneself entirely to the divine alone and to nobody and nothing else, and to bring down into ourselves by union with the Divine Mother all the transcendent light, power, wideness, peace, purity, truth consciousness and ananda of the supramental divine. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, Radha is the personification of the absolute love for the divine, total and integral in all parts of the being, from the highest spiritual to the physical, bringing the absolute self-giving and total consecration of all the being and calling them down into the body and the most material nature, the supreme Ananda. Purity, says our Lord, is to accept no other influence but only the influence of the divine. Faithfulness is to admit and to manifest no other moments but only the moments prompted and guided by the divine. Sincerity means to lift all the moments of the being to the level of the highest consciousness and realization already attained. Sincerity exacts the unification and harmonization of the whole being in all its parts and moments around the central divine will. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the divine gives itself to those who give themselves without reserve and in all parts of and in all their paths to the divine. For them, the calm, the light, the power, the bliss, the freedom, the wideness, the heights of knowledge, the seas of Ananda. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, talk of surrender or a mere idea or tepid wish for integral consecration will not do. There must be a push for a radical and total change. It is not by a mere mental attitude that this can be done, or even by any number of inner experiences which leave the outer man as he was. It is this outer man who has to open, to surrender, and to change. His every least moment, habit, action has to be surrendered, seen, held up, and exposed to the divine light, offered to the divine force for its old forms and motives to be destroyed, and the divine truth and the action of the transforming consciousness of the Divine Mother to take their place. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo continues to say, there is not much spiritual meaning in keeping open to the Mother if you withhold your surrender. Self-giving or surrender is demanded of those who practice this integral yoga, because without such a progressive surrender of the being, it is quite impossible to get anywhere near the goal. To keep open means to call in her force to work in you, and if you do not surrender to it, it amounts to not allowing the force to work in you at all, or else only on condition that it will work in the way you want and not in its own way, which is the way of the divine truth. A suggestion of this kind is usually made by some adverse power or by some egoistic element of mind or vital which wants the grace or the force, but only in order to use it for its own purpose, and is not willing to live for the divine purpose. It is willing to take from the divine all it can, but not to give itself to the divine. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the soul, the true being, on the contrary, turns towards the divine and is not only willing but eager and happy to surrender. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, in this integral yoga, one is supposed to go beyond every mental idealistic culture. Ideas and ideals belong to the mind and are half-truths only. The mind, too, is more often than not satisfied with merely having an ideal, with the pleasure of idealizing, while life remains always the same, untransformed or changed only a little and mostly in appearance. The spiritual seeker does not turn aside from the pursuit of realization to mere idealizing. Not to idealize, but to realize the divine truth is always his aim, either beyond or in life also, and in the later case, it is necessary to transform mind and life, which cannot be done without surrender to the action of the divine force, the Mother. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, to seek after the impersonal is the way of those who want to withdraw from life, and usually they try by their own effort and not by an opening of themselves to a superior power or by the way of surrender. For the impersonal is not something that guides or helps, but something to be attained, and it leaves each man to attain it according to his way and capacity of his nature. On the other hand, by an opening and surrender to the Mother, one can realize the impersonal and every other aspect of truth also. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the surrender must necessarily be progressive. No one can make the complete surrender from the beginning, so it is quite natural that when one looks into oneself, one should find its absence. That is no reason why the principle of surrender should not be accepted and carried out steadily from stage to stage. from stage to stage, from field to field, applying it successively to all parts of the nature. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, in the early part of the sadhana, by early I do not mean a short part, effort is indispensable. Surrender, of course, but surrender is not a thing that is done in a day. The mind has its ideas and it clings to them. The human vital resists surrender, for what it calls surrender in the early stages is a doubtful kind of self giving with a demand in it. The physical consciousness is like a stone, and what it calls surrender is often no more than inertia. It is only the psychic that knows how to surrender, and the psychic is usually very much wealed in the beginning. When the psychic awakes, it can bring a sudden and true surrender of the whole being, for the difficulty of the rest is rapidly dealt with and disappears. But till then, effort is indispensable, or else it is necessary till the force comes, flooding down into the being from above and takes up the sadhana, does it for one more and leaves less and less to the individual effort. But even then, it is, if not effort, at least aspiration and vigilance are needed till the possession of mind, will, life, and body by the divine power is complete. I have dealt with this subject, I think, in one of the chapters of the book The Mother. Our Lord continues to say, on the other hand, there are some people who start with a genuine and dynamic will for a total surrender. It is those who are governed by the psychic are governed by a clear and enlightened mental will, which, having once accepted surrender as the law of the sadhana, will stand no nonsense about it and insist on the other parts of the being following its direction. Here, there is still effort, but it is so ready and spontaneous and has so much the sense of the greater force behind it that the sadhak hardly feels that he is making an effort at all. In the contrary case of a will in the mind or vital, to retain self will, a reluctance to give up your independent movement, there must be struggle and endeavor until the wall between the instrument in front and the divinity behind or above is broken. No rule can be laid down which applies without distinction to everybody. The variations in human nature are too great to be covered by a single trenchant rule. Our Lord says there is a state in which the sadhak is conscious of the divine force working in him or of its results at least, and does not obstruct its descent or its action by his own mental activities, vital restlessness or physical obscurity and inertia. That is openness to the divine. Surrender is the best way of opening, but aspiration and quietness can do it up to a certain point so long as there is not the surrender. Surrender means to consecrate everything in oneself to the divine, to offer all one is and has, not to insist on one's ideas, desires, and habits, but to allow the divine truth to replace them by its knowledge, will, and action everywhere. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, always keep in touch with the divine force. The best thing for you is to do that simply and allow it to do its own work. Wherever necessary, it will take hold of the inferior energies and purify them. At other times, it will empty you of them and fill you with itself. But if you let your mind take the lead and discuss and decide what is to be done, you will lose the touch with the divine force, and the lower energies will begin to act for themselves, and all go into confusion and wrong movement. Will continue.